Pro-life talk. Real world answers. This is Life Report.
Welcome to Life Report. I'm your host, Josh Brahm, and I'm here with my two good friends, and one of them's my brother, Timothy Brahm, training specialist with Justice for All, as well as my very good friend, Anthony Trent, who is a volunteer at Justice for All. I've been wanting to get Anthony on Life Report for a long time, because even though he's not yet fully on staff with Justice for All, he's actually fundraising for that. So if you want to fund him, you would love that. Anthony has this love for people that I'm wanting more pro-life people to have. So I'm just excited to have both of you on the show. And what we decided to do today was I wanted to get back to what we like to talk about on Life Report, which is practical dialogue tips. Anthony and Tim are talking to pro-choice people all the time, and they are learning as they do that what are kind of techniques and things that they're doing that for a lot of people may be subtle. It's not like what arguments we're using. It's what are the little things that we're doing during dialogues that are maybe helping those dialogues to go well. And so I've asked Anthony and Tim to kind of create a list of what are the things that right now in the last kind of several months that you've been noticing have been making the biggest impact on your dialogues. And so if you are pro-life, or if you're even pro-choice and you're having dialogues with people about this, I think this show will be very helpful for you. So Anthony, let me start with you. One of the things that you said, and this sounds really familiar to me, I don't know where you heard this, but you said it's really helpful to shut off your inner monologue. Talk to me about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think prior to doing any sort of Justice for All training or Justice for All outreach, as you know, we go on campus and we're talking to students that disagree with us. Most students that we talk to disagree with us. And I think it's very easy to sort of treat people like they're a mind to be changed or they're an argument to win. Mm-hmm. And so I think prior to the training that I did was when someone would say something to support abortion choice, what I would do in my head was say, okay, they said this, and my immediate response is going to be this.
Right.
And they're probably going to say this, so then my response is going to be this. And so I think it's really easy to sort of treat your conversation like it's a debate round. Mm-hmm. But that's just not persuasive. It's not, the person doesn't feel like they're being listened to. And so what I've really tried to done is kind of shut that monologue off, saying, okay, I'm not going to try to think of a response right away, but I'm going to just reflect on what they're saying, making sure I'm asking the right types of questions, not to set them up for some kind of gotcha, but to set them up to so I can understand their position, so I can truly reflect on what they're saying and give them the best answer that I think truly represents their position.
Yeah, I love that you said that you're wanting to treat pro-choice people like people and not like a notch on your pro-life belt, that you can use as like, oh, look at this thing that I did, write a newsletter or whatever. It's like, no, it's like these are people. And I want us to humanize the people who dehumanize the unborn. And I think a lot of pro-life people ironically dehumanize the people who dehumanize the unborn. So I think that's really good. It also gives you a chance to respond appropriately if they've dropped any kind of emotional bombs in the conversation. And that happens when you're talking about abortion. And suddenly it's like if you're like right coming back with this talking point or this soundbite or zinger or something in your head, it's like, no, this is not going to be helpful at all. You don't want to treat it like I actually saw a pro-life speech that was titled, "If they say, you say." Like, yeah, so let's maybe not that, and maybe let's have a conversation. Okay, next, Anthony, you said it's been important for you to, if the conversation stalls about abortion, get to know the person you're dialoguing with. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think that there can sometimes, especially if we're on a college campus, it's really cool. A lot of students that we talk to are really like actually enjoying the conversation, which is really rare, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're having a conversation about this controversial issue.
You would expect it to be rare, at least.
Yeah, exactly. Like either confrontational or awkward. And sometimes you can talk for 1 or 2 hours. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
One conversation I had last semester was a 3.5 hour long conversation with one student. And I think the conversation can kind of stall out. You know, this young man I was talking to he wasn't going to budge on the abortion position. He was just a little stubborn. I don't think he wanted to change his mind on the spot, which is totally okay. But there was kind of a lull in the conversation where it's, okay, we can go round and round on talking about the humanity of the unborn.
Right.
I've gone through all of these arguments. What do you think about God? You know, just getting to know him as a person. Where is his perspective coming from? And we were able to have a great conversation. Both of us were Catholic, and we were able to kind of talk about our faith and how it influenced how we think about the issue of abortion. And I thought that was actually more productive than kind of going in circles on the abortion issue.
And is that always the question that you ask when you're wanting to move it off the topic of abortion to something else? Or are you always just jumping in with, what do you think about God? Or are you sometimes asking other things?
You know, it honestly depends on the person. You know, some people are not very open to talking about religion. That's fine. So a lot of times I'll ask, you know, what are you studying? Where have you always been pro-choice? Sometimes I ask more of the background about why they hold the beliefs they do. It's not necessarily religion, but yeah, I think it's just good to get to know the person you're talking to. Especially if the abortion conversation is not going to get anywhere, there might be a topic that's more productive for that person to talk with.
And when we were preparing the content for this show, you wrote something that I thought was really interesting. You said that for some of these people, you've been able to continue that conversation later in emails. And frankly, I've actually had a very poor success rate at making that happen. I've exchanged email addresses with people a lot of times. I'm like, oh man, we just had this amazing conversation. We're totally she's gonna email me in like in 2 days, you know, whatever. And then like almost 0% success rate. And I'm wondering, maybe I wasn't doing a good enough job, like you have been, of getting to know them as a person and not just as someone to dialogue with abortion about it. So my question, my follow-up for you, Anthony, about that is, do you attribute anything else to your success of being able to get people to email you back after the conversation, or do you think it mainly has to do with the fact that you got to know them and other things that they're interested in or doing?
Sure. I think getting to know the person does help a lot, but I think also most of the time when I've been able to exchange emails, it's because they've brought up some kind of argument or some type of study that I just honestly don't know how to answer. And I'll just tell them, actually, that's a valid point. I actually don't have an answer for you on the spot, but I would love to get an answer for you. Could I get your email address? And I'm not trying to, you know, sidestep your question. I think it's legitimate. And then I'm able to email them and follow up with that. I don't always get a response back, but I think it's good that at least in their inbox they're getting an email that's answering their question. Or if I'm citing some sort of study that I read about some kind of issue, and they're like, I don't really believe that, I'm able to say, well, I can actually just email it to you. I can just email you the link. And so at least that way I followed up with them and had the humility in the conversation to be like, actually don't know how to answer you right now. So I think that's part of it as well.
Tim, let me jump to you. You said something interesting that you've noticed, especially lately with the other volunteers on campus, that rate of speech makes a difference. And there was a couple different things you meant by that. So just jump in and talk to us about that.
Sure. So one of them is that sometimes when we have a lot of thoughts going on in our minds at one time, we start speaking really, really, really fast, because we have so many things that we need to get to.
I never do that, by the way. I don't have any
do that
problem.
all the time, and it's terrible. And I do it all the time too. And so if you're like me or like Josh, Anthony's not as bad at this. You need to really monitor your rate of speech. And I don't mean that in a like otherwise you won't be able to listen way. Like sometimes maybe you process really well and really quickly, and maybe you're listening great. But if you're talking really, really fast and you're going then it doesn't sound like you're listening, and it makes the person uncomfortable. That's not a normal speed of a conversation, and so it just kind of it steps up the intensity. Like if you're driving in your car and you've got your windshield wipers at like the highest speed because it's raining really hard, it just makes everything more intense. I think the same is true if you're talking really, really quickly.
Good point.
And so if you have a natural tendency to do that, you want to monitor that. And another thing that I think is important is having pauses in between the end of the person you're talking to, at the end of what they're saying, and what you're then going to say next. Because if they finish their sentence and then rapid fire, you jump to the next thing, even if you're being like really gracious and you're being a good ambassador and you are actually listening to them, it's not going to sound like you're listening to them, and it's going to give the conversation more of a debate kind of a feel that I don't find works out very well. So just slowing down. I've had volunteers who I've observed at JFA outreaches who will just jump immediately to the next thing, and I'll go to them afterwards and I'll say, all right, I'm going to give you a rule. You have to count to 3 before you can start talking.
Mentally, or do they have to outward?
Mentally, they have to count to 3. 1, 2, 3, and then say what they're going to say.
Yeah.
Because that gives them kind of the crutch they need to get in the habit of holding off a little bit, let the conversation slow down, and be a little bit more relational.
Well, for me, if it's a new volunteer, and if they're able to come back right away, that's going to be a signal to me that probably they're not listening as well as they could be. You know, I mean, for me, I mean, it's like probably for us, after we've had, hundreds and hundreds of conversations, it's probably true that we can actually silence that inner monologue and still, have noted, okay, here's the argument they're making and here's the direction I want to go with it without really taking time to think about it. But for a new volunteer who's just now trying to figure out bodily rights arguments and different types of personhood arguments, if they're coming back right away with, okay, let's talk about thalidomide, I'm thinking, let's just figure out, are we really doing a good job listening? And if you are, a lot of times we're going to need to take a couple of beats and figure out, okay, what would be the question that I want to ask next. Anthony, talk to me about being a fluid dialoguer. You said that was important to you. Tell me what you mean by fluid dialoguer.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I can't speak for every volunteer, but when I started a year ago, started doing the JFA program, the way we structure our seminar is, okay, we address off-topic arguments, we address the biology, we address the equality of the unborn, we talk about bodily rights. And I think if we have enough conversations, we want to focus on each one of those in this specific order. Like, we think the pro-choice person, because we structure the seminar that way, is going to say, okay, let's talk about biology. Okay, let's talk about philosophy. But for some of these students, the way they think about abortion, I mean, they have a strong opinion, but they're not thinking about it the way a pro-life advocate.
It might not be as linear for them right now.
Right. They're not thinking about this issue every day the same way we are. And so they might jump to personhood. They might bring up another off-topic argument. I think that's pretty common. I'll get throughout the conversation. We're talking about the personhood of the unborn, and then they'll say something like, but like women are just so poor and they shouldn't be having, children. And then, well, I have to trot out a toddler now. And it's not just because we address something once doesn't mean it's going to go in this specific order. So I think you just sort of have to labor with the person you're talking with and kind of jump all over the place and kind of be flexible.
Okay. So I want to ask you a question about that, but it might be the question that Tim was going to ask. So let me ask my question, but then if that's not the one, then Tim can jump in too. But I want to ask you, because Gabby and I have been trying to figure out what is the best thing to do when someone is all over the map. And sometimes that happens. It's like we've gone from off topic to bodily rights to personhood, back to bodily rights to another off topic thing, back to bodily rights. It's like a ping pong table. And it feels like sometimes if you completely go with them wherever, it might not be as helpful to them as narrating the debate. Sometimes we want to say, okay, I completely heard that question, but it seems like we were talking about bodily rights, which means it seems like it makes sense that you would be maybe just assuming for sake of argument that it is a person. Do you think that there's a place for narrating the debate, or do you always follow, the bouncing ball wherever it goes?
Yeah, I think there certainly is a place to narrate the debate. And what I'll say is, okay, it seems like you have, for instance, these two views. You seem to have this bodily rights view that we've talked a little bit about. it doesn't seem like you think the unborn's a human being. So is there one of these that you want to focus on first? And I'll sort of like, I'll let them pick which kind of topic they want to go on first. I don't want to be all over the place, certainly. And so I think there is a place for narrating the debate. I just think, I guess where I'm thinking is, if they really want to talk about bodily rights, and I'm just like, no, we need to talk about the humanity of the unborn, I think that's going to pose some challenges. And so I think there's a place for narrating the debate. But I think we have to be willing to meet the concerns of the individual in front of us and not just kind of go in the particular order that we want to go. The person's not thinking the same way we are.
And that leads to another point that you had made, Anthony, and I want you to flesh this out for me. You said utilize different approaches to different types of people. What does that mean to you?
Mm-hmm. I think that there is this, I don't know, it seems like people have different ways of thinking about the abortion issue, or they have different styles of dialogue. And so some people, the Justice for All exhibit that we set up on campus is 18 foot tall. It has graphic images of abortion. If the person comes up to me and is angry about the images, doesn't want to look at the images, the way I'm going to communicate the truth and the horror of abortion is probably not to ask them if they want to see another graphic image. That's probably not the approach. But for some people that maybe have never seen a graphic image before, and they're talking about abortion in this really vague sense, I know that when we bring up thalidomide, for example, and we tell them what that drug does, and they're like, wow, that's really horrible. Like, I'm against that because it harms the child. And a lot of times I'll ask, well, do you know what abortion does? Can I read you how abortion procedures work? Or can I show you an image of a child that was aborted? I think those are different ways that we can reach people. I've had some people react really strongly to seeing a graphic image. I've had people react really well to hearing how abortion procedures are done. It's all about helping that person know the truth about abortion in a way that works well for them.
Yeah, I know Tim's had a lot of really good success with that too. Tim, you said something I thought that was really good as we were talking about the show. You talked about the need for filler sentences, and as you explained what you meant by that, I was like, that's something I'm doing all the time. That's really good, but I never really thought about it the way I think you were thinking about it. So I would love for you to expand on that thought.
Sure. So I think of filler sentences as the things in between, like the arguments or the lines that you might learn in like a seminar or something like that, or in a pro-life apologetics book. Things like if you're going to trot out a toddler, before you trot out the toddler, say, I know this is a really weird question, but just go with me for a second. It's just that simple step, I find, makes people, generally speaking, react better to, do you think that it's okay to kill a child because you're too poor to take care of him, a born child? If you don't do something like that, oftentimes it's like comes out of left field. And they might think that you're begging the question and you're assuming that the unborn is the same as the toddler, and then they're going to say, well, but it's not. And then things get off base and the tension might increase. There's little things like that. But before you do a thought experiment, just say, I'm not saying this is something that people are going to do, or the thalidomide example is another one. I'm not saying that I think women want to go out and use thalidomide all the time, but I'm trying to get at a moral principle here. What do you think that the law should be regarding a case like that? So that's one example. Another example is really trying to cue for people that I'm listening to them. Because if you ask a clarification question, sometimes it doesn't sound like it. Or if they're already feeling like they're kind of being attacked, they might take it a different way. Or for some people like me, I've just got this really frustrating tone in my voice sometimes that I've been trying to fight against, where even if I'm like really genuinely asking a clarification question, I think it sounds like I'm being patronizing. And so I've got to really watch out for that kind of thing. So I'll use filler sentences like, I'm trying to understand what you're saying, but I'm struggling. Like, help me out here.
Right.
Or just a simple, help me understand you. It sounds like you might mean this or you might mean this. I'm trying to understand you. Help me out. Those kinds of things can help a lot. So they know that you're trying to listen to them. This might seem really pedantic, but I do it a lot, and I think it helps. And that's, you seem like a smart guy. Like, you know where I'm going with this. If they're obviously tracking with you and like jumping ahead, like, yeah, you seem like a smart guy. Here's what that is. It's not for me primarily like giving them an undue compliment. It's communicating to them that I'm not trying to score debate points. And so just to say something like, you seem like you're a sharp guy. Like, you're tracking with me here. It just gives the conversation more of a fluid, like we're just two people having this conversation, as opposed to I'm representing the pro-life view, you're representing the pro-choice view, and now it's time to fight.
Anthony, you and this is another one that I've got to think a little bit about. I don't even know if I completely agree with you on this, so let's have a little bit of a discussion. You said after you verbalize the common ground that you share with a pro-choice person, don't say but.
Yeah. First of all, that's not an absolute rule. I am not opposed
See, it
to...
looks like one when I see it written down. It says,
Sure.
Don't.
Yeah, I think it can come off... I guess it's not so much emphasizing... I think it can kind of come off dismissive, depending on your tone. Saying, I agree. Like, what do you think about late-term abortion? Well, I'm against it. Yeah, I agree, but what's the difference between a late-term child and an
Yeah, that did sound pretty dismissive.
It does sound dismissive because you didn't take the time to... It doesn't sound like you're actually acknowledging there's common ground, a lot of common ground between you. So I think the emphasis on my rule, at least, is to not sort of brush over the common ground and go straight to the argument. I think that there's validity sometimes with truly, genuinely talking to the person saying, I think we really agree on this particular issue, and can you tell me, and take that to talk about our differences that we have on the issue. I know for me, I at University of Central Oklahoma, it was a few months ago, I was talking to the pro-choice protest table that they had set up, and several of the women there that were at the table were very distrusting that I was with the JFA outreach that we were doing. And they were just like, they were just really suspicious. And so I just asked them a lot of questions. And I actually took just like a minute or two to talk about the common ground we had, because I felt that is where we needed to build the rapport. But had I just said, we agree on late-term abortion, but what's the difference? Or, yeah, I agree with sex selection abortion, but why is that so bad? I don't think it would have come off the right way. But I think a lot of that has to do with the tone and the rapport that you've built up in the conversation as well.
That's basically what I was going to ask, is if you've built some rapport, do you think then there's maybe a little bit of more allowance where you can do different things that maybe wouldn't have worked otherwise, but now after you've built some rapport? So I think we agree on that. So let's talk about this last one. We only have time for one more, but I think this is important, and it's really subtle, but I know I wrote an article about this, and after I published it, there's a lot of people, including some like Students for Life of America staffers, that were like, this makes so much sense. And this is like, they're teaching this in their seminars now sometimes, and it's the idea of not standing right in front of someone when you talk to them. Anthony, why don't we shoot to you first? Why has that been helpful to you?
I've just sort of noticed, just anecdotally, that when I am standing right in front of a person, and we're like that for a long time, it can be very easy for... it can appear a little combative. It can kind of be more of a debate way of doing things. I've found when just standing side by side or sitting on a bench is something I really like to do, is just sitting on a bench with a person and talking with them. And we're able to sort of, it's not about you against me, me against you. It's, okay, let's stand shoulder to shoulder and let's look at this issue in front of us. We have a lot of common ground, and I'm open-minded to change my position on the issue. And I hope you're open-minded too. And let's actually just explore this honestly. Let's have integrity when we're talking about this. I've just found the tone, the nonverbal body language, it helps so much in that conversation.
Tim, jump in. What is there anything you would like to say about that?
Yeah, I think we have interesting things that we do without really thinking about it. And one of them is when we disagree with someone, we face them directly. And when we agree with them, we like stand side by side with them. So I was at University of Colorado at Colorado Springs a few weeks ago, and I noticed 3 of my volunteers, all dudes, in this little concave facing this one pro-choice girl. And it was uncomfortable looking. Like it was like I happened to know that they were all pro-life volunteers, but it was obvious that anybody looking at the situation, they're not standing in a circle all talking together. It's these 3 versus this one person. And so being another guy, like I kind of felt uncomfortable. Like I wanted a girl to go over there, but nobody was. So I went over there and I walked over and I stood next to the pro-choice girl, just to try to break up the concave a little bit, even though I disagreed with her. And later on in the conversation, I did engage her in dialogue, and I think we got somewhere. But that dynamic just really made me more conscious that that's the kind of thing we naturally do. These guys were not thinking to themselves, well, let's see, I agree with him, so I need to stand over here. But it's just something that we naturally do. And so I think the same can apply to a one-on-one dialogue, where if we're facing them directly, that can come across like, all right, well, we disagree, so now here we go. Whereas having a different kind of posture can make a real difference.
I wrote an article about this. In fact, there's an article that came out that was done by the psychology departments of the University of Freiburg, the British Columbia, and Harvard, and it was called "In the Eye of the Beholder, Eye Contact Increases Resistance to Persuasion." So I wrote a little article explaining kind of what they found in this article. There's an interesting quote by this FBI guy who used to do like interrogations and conversations, and here's like, this is what helped me, and I just thought this could be something that's helpful for pro-life people. So if you want to find that, you can go to joshbrahm.com and click on the archives button at the top. You can find that, and I'll post a link in the show notes. Anthony Trent is a volunteer with Justice for All. If you would like to support what he's doing, go to jfaweb.org. Go to the Meet the Mentors page, and there's a link there where you can support his work. Timothy Brahm is a training specialist at Justice for All, and you can also check out his blog at timothy.david.brahm. And as always, if you want to have a great impact on any conversation, just remember to ask good questions, listen to understand, and find genuine common ground when possible, as well as doing everything we've talked about in this show. That's our show. Have a great week. Now go talk to someone.
You've been watching Life Report, pro-life talk, real world answers. Life Report is produced by Right to Life of Central California. Visit their website at fresnoprolife.org.